Euromaxx highlights. And here's your host, Layla Harak.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to our highlight show. Let's see what we have lined up for you this time round. Surprising Italian designer Ferruccio Laviani's furniture creations. Creative profiling a top mobile games manufacturer. And fearless, Austria's Toni Bender puts parachutes to the test. Well, when getting a pet for the family, most people will pick something traditional, like a dog or a cat. And then there are those that love bugs. They may not bring you your newspaper, fetch your slippers, or wag their tail as you scratch their head. But as any bug-loving kid will tell you, if you like to watch your pets, nothing beats an army of marching ants.
This is Camponotus herculeanus. The sight of the black carpenter ant must be terrifying to other ant species. The carpenter ant can be up to 1.6 centimeters long, making it Europe's biggest species. It likes to live in rotting wood, it eats flies and mosquitoes, and if you bother it, it will bite you. Ant dealer Martin Sebesta thinks ants make cute pets.
What's fascinating about ants is their social life. There is constant communication among them. They create something together. They expand the nest or bring in food or share the food. They have different occupations, and it's always fascinating to watch them.
Sebesta, a trained industrial mechanic, has been fascinated by ants since he was a teenager. In 2003, he opened up his own ant shop in Berlin, the first in Germany. It has more than 20 species. They come from all over the world. Sebesta has between 10 and 20,000 colonies in stock. That includes some exotic species like the South American leafcutter ant, which can carry 30 times its own body weight. The leaves feed a fungus, which in turn becomes the ant's dinner.
The leafcutter ant's nests can be so huge. In nature, they can be as large as 50 square meters and 8 meters deep. Sometimes private owners can no longer handle the colony after 2 years, so we get them in touch with the zoo. That needs to be considered.
Bianca Drenska also has a fondness for exotic ants. The biology teacher has 16 different species in her Berlin apartment. For example, the South American Pachycondilla apicalis, an aggressive predator that stings like a wasp. Could this be the ideal house pet?
There are a number of reasons why I think it's a good pet. I can create a beautiful landscape. I can't do that with a dog or a cat. I am fascinated by this mini ecosystem. It isn't expensive to feed ants, just a few grasshoppers and sugar water. And they're not loud.
So, they are a comparatively inexpensive pet, though a queen from this Australian species costs 160 euros. And there is another disadvantage to keeping ants. The exotic species cannot legally be allowed into the domestic ecosystem.
First, you should ask, are these ants under some form of legal protection? Is the species endangered? You shouldn't try to maintain a colony if the species is endangered. And then, are there any permits required? Australia is very strict about what you can bring into or out of the country.
So, a beginner shouldn't start with an exotic species, but a domestic one, like these ants. Martin Sebesta produces and sells starter sets from 50 euros up. Sebesta delivers the ants with 2 terrariums and all the necessary equipment. 1 queen and 1 worker ant are enough to produce a colony of thousands.
Ultimately, we see ants outdoors, but we don't see what they do inside their nest. We just see an ant dragging something into it. But then what happens? If I open or destroy an ant nest, all I see is a swarming throng.
And that's why Martin Sebesta regards the ant as the best house pet. His shop now has 10 employees. They take orders and send ants all over Europe.
Well, next week, the world's largest international furniture fair opens in Milan, Italy. Exhibitors are currently adding the finishing touches to their designs. So we headed to Milan and caught up with Ferruccio Laviani, who has made quite a name for himself in the industry over the past 25 years. His unique range of furniture combines the old with the new.
Furniture with an element of surprise. This dresser by Ferruccio Laviani is called Whole. The Italian designer uses many of his designs to scrutinize the classic principles of style, like clear lines, symmetry, or purity in form.
I
try to give all my objects a special aesthetic or artistic note. With this design, I feel a little bit like the rebellious son from a good family who brings his grandma's heirlooms into a squatter's house and lives with them in a totally different way.
Ferruccio Laviani's newest project, Good Vibrations, is still just a draft on his computer. The inspiration for deformed furniture came to him through video interference.
I got the idea to have a piece of furniture in the house that looks as if it's distorted, a vibration that really hits you when you pass by.
But first, the designer had to convince his client of the idea.
When they saw it, their mouths were gaping open like this.
Since then, Laviani has been working full force. The first distorted wardrobe has to be finished in time for the Milan Furniture Fair, which opens next week. This wooden table is called toia, or tablecloth. Laviani likes to play with the appearance of objects and the contrast between individual elements, like in this sideboard called Evolution.
Irony is important in my work. This table, for example, is called birignao. That's a dialect word for joke. But I don't want to be funny at all costs. Irony always has to suit the product, so I'm more reserved.
Laviani works for famous manufacturers. For Foscarini, he designed these lamps, called Orbital and Supernova. Ferruccio Laviani has been art director for the Cartel Company for 23 years. His lamp Bourgie from 2003 is a bestseller. Ferruccio has also worked for Dolce & Gabbana, designing for boutiques, restaurants, and bars. He knows both designers from his college days.
One day they tell me, "We've noticed that we have a lot of things from you. Wouldn't it be easier if you just designed them straight for us, without us first having to look for your products?"
Laviani has his work cut out in the final days before the Milan Furniture Fair. He rushes from one client to the next. On top of that, his distorted furniture collection has made the headlines. Journalists are standing in line to interview him, but he doesn't want to be branded because of his style.
I just don't like it when people put labels on me, like neo-baroque or the guy with the distorted furniture. I want to be perceived as an all-around designer.
This is his collage sofa from 2012. It's a mix of style and epochs that people can put together themselves. It sells for about 10,000 euros.
Of course, I always want people to find what I make attractive, but not because they see the signature belongs to me, but because they like it. If they then say, "Oh, that's from Laviani," that's when I'm most happy.
This mosaic sideboard is to be finished before the Milan Fair, the largest and most important trade fair of its kind in the world. It's just one of many new designs by Ferruccio Laviani.
Well, after dust clouds disrupted international flights back in 2011, the world became acquainted with the mighty volcanoes of Iceland. The fact that it has so many volcanoes also means that the island is home to a number of underground lava caves. The recently discovered Buri Cave was formed 5,000 years ago, and it's located south of the capital, Reykjavik. With a guide who knows what they're doing, you can trek through the ice-covered cave as long as you're physically and mentally up for a challenge.
These caves are located 10 meters underground. Spectacular icicles hang from the walls. A trip to the lava caves is exciting, but also risky.
And of course, you have those big, huge rocks covered with ice, and it's really slippery.
This group of hikers set out a few hours earlier. They've already walked 2 kilometers across a lava plain. Temperatures are just above freezing. Guide Kari Björnsson is taking 2 Icelandic tourists into the Buri Cave, which is around 5,000 years old.
It's basically a tunnel with a few paths that you could get lost, but you should always be able to find a way out. Maybe if you didn't have a light, you would get lost. But going here without a guide is not recommended. It's bad. You can get lost and hurt and cause a lot of trouble.
The only way into the cave is through a hole that's barely 50 centimeters wide. This is no place for anyone who suffers from claustrophobia. A lot of tourists panic. The Buri Cave was discovered in May 2005 by Björn Hroarsson, Kari's father. He's one of Iceland's best-known cave researchers and taught his son everything he knows, such as how the caves were formed.
This cave was formed 5,000 years ago in an eruption in a volcano that is close by. But a cave like this is formed in an eruption, of course, where the lava flows out of the volcano. And lava usually flows in channels, and if it moves quickly enough and for a long period, a roof starts building atop because it's colder at top than it is next to the lava. So a roof starts forming.
It's -2 degrees Celsius in the cave, and icicles in all shapes and sizes jut out from the walls. Making your way through the cave requires some climbing skill. Kari and the tourists take nearly an hour to cover just the first 150 meters. The group's advance is slow and careful.
We've had some accidents. There was a girl that broke her neck last summer, but she made it. She's fine today. But yeah, there are accidents, can happen.
The caves extend for almost a kilometer. The walls of lava stone are up to 10 meters high and 10 meters wide. After about 3.5 hours, the group reaches the end of the trail and the edge of a spectacular lava pit 17 meters deep, one of the deepest lava pits on Earth.
Wow! Wow!
I think it's amazing, actually. This is my first time in a cave, so I'm it's really fascinating, actually. I'll definitely do it again, so.
8 hours after they started, the group makes their way across a lava plain in the darkness. It's a 1.5-hour hike back to the car.
Well, with so many people nowadays owning smartphones, mobile computer games are on the rise. Hundreds of companies have developed gaming apps in recent years, but only a handful catch on worldwide. One of the latest crazes is called Royal Revolt, and it's fast becoming a hit with gamers of all ages.
He's one angry prince. After returning home from boarding school, this heir-in-waiting finds his relatives have carved up the kingdom between them. The aim of Royal Revolt is to help the young prince win back what is rightfully his. The game was developed by Flare Games, together with its subsidiary Keen Flare. Just days after hitting app stores, the game was downloaded by more than 1 million gamers worldwide. Now it's on the shortlist for a prize at this year's German Game Awards.
1 million downloads sounds like an awful lot, but you shouldn't forget that there are billions of smartphones out there. But it's a respectable figure, and many games never manage to get close to that amount. Nevertheless, we're aiming for more, a lot more.
Klaus Kersting is no stranger to success. The 33-year-old founded his first computer game studio 10 years ago and turned it into one of the world's biggest games publishers. A year and a half ago, he set up Flare Games in Karlsruhe. The company's team of 50 developers turns creative ideas into popular mobile games.
We've got a lot of veterans from the gaming industry here. Some come from classic PC games and from the online games branch. Some of them have been around for more than 10 years. It's definitely the sort of company that isn't very common here in Germany. We managed because we have many well-known people from the gaming industry here and are attracting talented young people who can help support our team.
One veteran game designer is Ralf Marcinczyk. As Royal Revolt's lead artist, it was his job to oversee the artistic development of the game, together with Israeli animator Einaf Deri. The game's lead character has been kept simple. What at first glance might look like a game designed for children is actually targeted towards grown-up gamers.
The aim of the game is simple. You have to conquer one castle after another in order to reclaim the kingdom. Once you start, you realize there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. But generally, it's easy for players to get into the game and play it. It has a certain depth to it, but you'll be finished with your mission after 3 to 4 minutes and can do other things, and then come back to the game later.
Sales of mobile games doubled in Germany between 2011 and 2012. Tiny Wings is one of the most popular. The idea behind it is simple, but it's been a big success. Keep It Simple was a principle followed by the developers of Word Wonder. It's also in the running for a prize at this year's German Game Awards. The precursor to today's mobile games can be seen here at Berlin's Computer Game Museum. This pocket soccer game from Mattel was way ahead of its time when it hit stores back in 1976. Nokia released Snake more than 20 years later. It was the first game that could be played on a cell phone.
Mobile games got an incredible boost thanks to smartphones. They were first intended to just make calls, but now they are so powerful that they are perfectly suited to playing games on and can be permanently hooked up to the web. That enables multiplayer gaming anytime and anywhere. This has been made possible by the advent of the smartphone and has led to the expansion of the whole mobile game sector.
The programmers at Flare Games love to play games, whether they're board games or of the mobile variety. At the moment, they're working on 6 new mobile games. 2 of them are slated to hit app stores in May. The developers are keeping them closely under wraps, but have already disclosed that they'll be strategy games.
Here in Germany, people love their bread. And the best and most popular thing to spread on it is, of course, butter. If you didn't already know, butter is made entirely from cream, but its taste changes according to the production methods. One of the best homemade butters is said to come from a farm near Sweden's second largest city, Gothenburg. The butter is so popular, it's now being sold to many of Europe's top restaurants.
Top chefs from all over Europe rave about this butter and gladly serve it in their gourmet restaurants. And this is where it comes from, about half an hour's drive north of Gothenburg, in Sweden. Sandra Bring and Patrick Johansson spent around a year experimenting with different butter recipes and production methods. They first asked a top chef to try their butter 4 years ago. He loved it and immediately ordered 40 kilograms.
So now it's separated into butter and buttermilk. My grandmother, she was a butter maker in the 40s, 50s and 60s, and she taught me to wash away all traces of this buttermilk, this white here. because then the butter will keep longer. But we do not do as my grandmother taught me. We keep the buttermilk inside. That way we have lots more flavor.
Homemade sour cream is the second reason for the butter's special taste. The couple leave the sour cream to ferment for 3 days with special bacterial cultures. It's then whipped in a machine which separates the butter and the buttermilk. About 200 kilograms are produced each week and sent to 20 or so top restaurants across Europe. A kilo costs around 18 euros.
The industrial butter is made in a modern machine. The whole process takes a couple of seconds.
Head chef Stefan Karlsson orders around 4 kilos of the butter every week for the Michelin star Fond restaurant in Gothenburg. Karlsson serves the butter with bread. He says it's much too good for cooking.
Det är riktigt bra. Bra, kanon. Den tar vi. This is handmade butter. It has the right sourness, it has the right saltness, and you can find a little bit of the buttermilk still in the butter, and it gives a lot of flavor for the butter. So for me it's the most perfect butter to use to eating on bread.
Great food starts with top ingredients, and one of those is most definitely the butter made by Sandra Bring and Patrick Johansson.
Next up, we'll meet a man with a serious adrenaline addiction. And if you're into paragliding, you'll be very happy to know that Toni Bender does what he does. The Bavarian native tests parachutes for paragliding. That means it's his job to really put a parachute to the test. Needless to say, he's one of the best in the world, which is a reassuring feeling for anyone with gear that bears his seal of approval.
This is Innsbruck in the Austrian Alps. Bad weather is expected, but for Bender, bad weather is sometimes good. He often tests paragliders under extreme conditions. Today, a cold front with westerly winds and thunderstorms is on the way. Mistakes could have fatal consequences.
The dangerous part about paragliding is when you're just above the ground. So I always pay special attention to the first 30 or 40 seconds to make sure nothing's wrong then. And then as soon as I'm 50 to 100 meters above ground, I can use my safety valve.
Tony's reserve parachutes are his safety valve. They're stowed in a harness on his back and could be essential in an emergency. Bender's paraglider is a prototype whose dimensions are 2.5 by 11 meters of nylon. Bender's employer is a paraglider maker near Innsbruck. Here he discusses his test flights with the developers. This paraglider will cost about 3,000 euros if it passes all the tests. It's marketed to experienced flyers. But Toni Bender doesn't just rise, he also falls. In his test flights, he has to put himself into situations that are every pilot's worst nightmare, like a collapsing canopy and a deep plunge. One of his greatest achievements was crossing the Alps without an engine. In all, as he rose and descended over the mountain range, he had to negotiate 40,000 metres of altitude. But his passion involves risks. He's broken various bones at various times.
When I'm up there hanging under a paraglider and don't know what it's going to do, I feel pretty uneasy and frightened. But when I'm testing one and trying all the maneuvers and know it's okay and that it can be controlled, I feel safe, I'm fine.
Toni Bender says he wants to paraglide for many years to come because he only really feels at home in the sky.
And that wraps up our highlight show. Thanks for being with us, and we hope to see you again very soon. Bye-bye.